going back to the deaths of Robert Walker and Echo Cole, this really, it bothered him, unlike a lot of other martyrs of the civil rights movement prior to it. And that Sunday, he delivered one of his most fiery sermons at the Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is known today as the Drum Major Instinct. And he tells almost as if he's preaching his own obituary. So, and this is exactly 60 days before he's killed at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis. And so you can begin to really see the levels of stress and tense and uncertainty. He said to Ralph Abernathy in confidence that, do I need to quit this movement at this point? He had just celebrated his 39th birthday and he'd accomplished so much, but we were still where we were as a country, with sanitation workers not able to sit in the front of a cab. They're making right about $1 an hour. If you were fired for you could be fired for being late for one day. And so, he saw Memphis as a way to build momentum for getting to Washington in midsummer.
Yeah, and I think we need to call out Reverend James Lawson, who was the minister who invited him to Memphis. Reverend Lawson, many people may know him from his involvement with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, training the students to participate in sit-ins. So he had this long career in this civil disobedience, social justice event. And so when February 1st happens, and then the 1,300 men go on strike, Lawson becomes part of a community committee to help support the strikers. And he calls King up and says, hey, I know what your Poor People's Campaign is about. You need to come to Memphis, right? And that's what physically brings Dr. King here, that invitation. But I think it's important that as we talk about Dr. King in those moments that, as you mentioned, he's struggling with his calling and his purpose at this time. And his ratings aren't that great. You know what I mean? Like nobody people aren't celebrating him like he was in 63. That energy is not around him. So I can just imagine him coming, and Lawson anticipated he would be well received in Memphis, but Dr. King didn't know that, right? And so when he finally gets here in Memphis, the Memphis community is excited to have him. They want him here. And, it's that warm reception that he gets from the strikers and their supporters at a rally at Mason Temple, where he makes a decision off the cuff, like a whole lot of ministers I know do, that, hey, I'm going to give you the spiritual support, the psychological support, but guess what? SCLC is here for financial support. And that's so phenomenal that there's in addition to AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. Did I get that right? Yeah, I think I did. Actually, the SCLC, the Civil Rights Organization, is saying, we have your back. I think that changes the dynamics of the strike completely.
Absolutely. And, this was to be the only time he comes to Memphis. I think that's the beauty and tragedy of this entire story, was that March the 18th address that he gives at the Mason Temple, it re-energizes his flame. Whatever he had taken steps back from, that gave him so much energy and confidence. And it was just, his approval rating was low, but he was still the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That same night, when he leaves the Mason Temple, he goes and he stays at the historic Lorraine Motel. And there's a young college group, Prairie View College in Texas, and they hear that Dr. King and SCLC are staying upstairs in room 306. And they go to the conference room and they serenade him. And for the first time,
that footage is unbelievable because, when you look at it, you can tell that the choir director basically knocked on everybody's doors. It's the middle of the night. and said, all right, y'all, come on, we're gonna sing for Dr. King. And so when you see the footage, like some girls are still in their curlers, they're half dressed, but they serenade him with this beautiful song. And so you're right that at the end of the day, despite public sentiment, there are still people who value him and support him. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that, between the rally and Prairie View, that it had to help uplift him in the work that he was doing at that moment.
He made Memphis a priority because of it, heavily because of the success of the March 18th rally. And so 10 days later, after a snowstorm overtakes the city of Memphis, March the 28th, 1968, which begins the countdown of our commemoration at the National Civil Rights Museum.